Well, hello there. No, this isn't the show at all. What this is a call to action. A call to like, share, and subscribe. Oh, by the way, please, if you can, head over to Apple, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or wherever you are listening to this awesome show. Click on that 5-star rating. Tell everyone in your orbit about it. Do whatever you have to do to make them listen and continue to listen to the show. All within reason, of course. Together, we can grow this show into something amazing. Thank you all for what you do out there. Now back to the fun. The whole Charlie Kirk assassination thing. And kind of sad over the weekend. I know I did like an immediate reaction panel type thing on World Ablaze with Jesse Rosinski and Dutchess, New Jersey. And I know I said some stuff, because initial reaction, I don't want to say emotion, but immediate, explosion, if you will, on it. And I kind of sat back most of this weekend thinking a little bit more about it and what it actually means, if it means anything. And I started to do some deep dives into, left-right violence, who really, shoots the weapons and all that. Looking through FBI database, other crime websites. And what I found is that this is really, truly a both sides issue. It really is. Now, if you want to say within the last, 10 years or so, it's mostly been more of I guess you can say right-leaning affiliations. Okay. I would agree with some of that. Well, the jokes, were there jokes and things? Yeah. Paul Pelosi got attacked by some dude with a hammer and he was in his underwear, and there was a couple of jokes. Donald Trump Jr. did one, for Halloween. But yet, when I look at the other side of the fence, I noticed the same kind of stuff. The same, when you go through social media, for the most part, it's a lot of similar rhetoric. It's a F you, you deserve to die, you suck, you should be shot. Just on and on, or a whole lot of F you, a whole lot of things like that. And when you dive on the other side, it's more of that call to action-y type stuff, war and So I mean, it really is both sides of the aisle that do this. But of course, when you ask them a Republican or a Democrat directly, they're going to obviously point the finger and say, no, 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 it's always you, it's never us. We're all angels here. And I think that's the bulk of this episode is going to be going over different points in time. Maybe I'll play a clip or two of these people. Maybe. I don't know yet. I mean, it's kind of, I don't really want to sit here and play debunk the retard. I really don't. But just in a more, and that's what we'll do. Well, I'm not going to sit here and do debunk the retard, but we're going to sit here and kind of in a general sense allude to some of what I've been watching and reading online and also on TV, your CNNs and whatever with their panel discussions and things. Um, like let's first start, and I'm gonna generalize obviously with some of what they said because I'm not gonna play the exact things, but because I don't want this to be like a 2 hour Monday. But I want to kind of open it this way. What Charlie Kirk was just nothing more than a political activist that shared his political beliefs and tried to organize and change hearts and minds. That's Charlie Kirk. That's all he really was. You can agree or you can disagree with his stance. He I watched a lot of footage over the weekend, a lot of debates. A lot of it is all out of context snippets, but looking at it and listening to it and some of his longer form podcasts, like when he did one with the Gavin Newsom show, he was on there. Um, when I when I look when I listen and watch these things, my massive takeaway out of it with Charlie Kirk was that he really, really believed that everything was so much better in the 1940s, 50s. You know, though that moment in time where everybody was married for the most part. All the kids had a mom and a dad. Crime rates were crime rates were, just middle of the road. Not a whole lot of murder or divide within the country. And then he wanted to go back to that. The wife was married with, taking care of the kids. The husband did most of the outdoor work for revenue, bringing in money into the home, paying the bills. Um, Defined roles between the man and the woman. He really, really believed in that, and you can tell just listening to him the way he talked and the way he set a lot of it up in his debates is he really truly in his soul believed that. And it's not I don't it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, good or bad. I mean, it really isn't. There's a lot of people that disagree because we're not in 1940 or 1950. We're in 2025 or 2020, or where things have massively changed economically and geographically, socioeconomics, all that. I mean, you just look at everything; it's all different. It's not that time anymore. You cannot have a single income household unless you're really making high six figures. It's very hard to do that. Most of America will have to have two people going to work. So if you're going to have children, then you're going to have to include some kind of childcare. This is stuff that I don't think resonated with him when it was brought up in some of his conversations with people. I think he just really felt like it worked this way and it should go back to this. And that's what I think that Charlie Kirk was. And when I watch when I watched him express his opinions on a lot of the things that are coming up in today's times, your transgenders, transvestites, gays, etc. He really did believe in his heart that it was a biblical sin, but he also believed in trying to convert them through preaching the message. So as it were, and I really that's all he really was. He wasn't a guy that was going to round up the troops and attack the government and take it over. He wasn't going to sit there and do that. He's a political guy, door knocking, try to get you to vote a certain way. His message about family and everything was in his mind. It was traditional as traditional can be. and a lot of people hated him for it because there are some moments where you can kind of feel that misogynistic tone in his voice because he really felt like this is the way it is. There was some, if you want to call it, you can call it racism or you can just, or bigotry or whatever, but he was very discriminatory against a lot of groups because he didn't feel like they were biblically, you know, following the God's teachings, biblical teachings. Yeah, and I may not have a full grasp on a lot of these. I'm pretty sure I don't have a complete grasp, if you will, on all of this this subject matter. But that's just how it felt watching and listening, and the way the way he was able to organize and change the young people, those hearts and minds of those young people, and amass a gigantic group with chapters all over the United States, and he was the figurehead of that. Um, and I just don't, I just never saw. I never saw or had the impression of that he was anything more than that. And I just think that looking at this whole thing a few days later, it's hard to explain what I'm getting at, but that's just how I viewed it. Like he was that type of person. And I don't understand how people how people would be like okay with what happened. But then there's some people that I was watching and I was listening to, and they were saying that, what happened to him was sad, but I don't have to celebrate who he is just because he died or what have you. And it's like very weird to me to listen to that when you and this again, this is where hypocrisy comes at play with both sides of the aisle. You got a lot of these people sitting there saying, "Well, I shouldn't have to celebrate or honor this man's life when he was a bigot or a racist or all these things that you want to say." But yet, once a year, we will sit here and celebrate the life of Martin Luther King Jr. Very odd to me that this is something that I found very interesting in what I was looking at in reading and watching and researching. Martin Luther King Jr. obviously two different figures. One was a political organizer, activist type thing. The other guy was more of a civil rights, religious type thing. Obviously, they're not exactly on the same path in terms of ideology or mission or whatever. But what they are not political figures in the public space that were both flawed, but yet one is honored with a day to himself and another is being shredded after his death and stepped on. Think about Martin Luther King for a second. When Martin Luther King was out there with his nonviolent protests and things like that, this guy was cheating on his wife on the regular and then going up on stage and throwing biblical verses around. And yet we gave him a day of remembrance because he was someone who championed the Civil Rights Act, which was later passed through Congress with Lyndon Johnson and all that. Very weird to me that this is acceptable, but Charlie Kirk talks about traditional values and traditional family as part of his message, and we call him a racist bigot. and he doesn't deserve to be remembered or honored for anything that he tried to achieve. But Martin Luther King Jr. tried to achieve something before his death, and he was honored for it while he was messing around behind his wife's back. This is what I'm saying here is not news. Everybody can look this up at any point in their life, and they can literally go down this rabbit hole of Martin Luther King Jr. And you can read all his speeches, you can read all his quotes, and then you can read all the stuff, all the tapes of Martin Luther King and his associates and the women that they were messing around with, and in the type of lifestyle that he led, which was which is biblically speaking, infidelity is a massive crime, if you will. And that guy gets a whole day to himself. He gets a couple of street signs. That guy is okay. Charlie Kirk is not, because he didn't believe that transgenderism should be forced onto children. He didn't believe that the affirmative action laws and the DEI laws were fair across the board, and they really did hurt the black community more than they realized. That was kind of his stance. But that's considered racist. But Martin Luther King's okay. I don't understand how that works. But you know what's even crazier is Donald Trump ordered the flag at half-staff, and yet everybody's losing their minds. Oh my gosh, he's honoring this racist bigot, and how much of this is garbage and blah 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 blah, right? Lyndon Johnson had a full day where the flags were at half-staff for Martin Luther King. The federal government, during the entire funeral for Martin Luther King, they held down all the security, they took care of all the transportation of the body. They made sure that Martin Luther King got where he needed to be for all of his funeral events. That casket, they made sure of it. You know how crazy that is, that we're now talking about how Charlie Kirk's body going on Air Force Two, although not the same thing, but the idea of the federal government taking care of the body of a political activist or a influential figure, as it was with Martin Luther King. This stuff is now complete bullshit, but Martin Luther King was allowed to get all of that? These are the comparisons that I'm making. Now, there's always going to be somebody out there who's going to sit there and go, "Oh, this isn't fair. This isn't right. What you're saying is wrong. You're stupid. You're dumb. You're all this." And it's like, okay, no, but look it up. In fact, I am absolutely going to go through this here. Martin Luther King's funeral was April 9th, 1968. One of the most significant public mourning events in history, guys. Okay? And there was 2 services. There was the private service at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and then there was the public procession to Morehouse College. All right? Jesse Jackson got to be there. Andrew Young got to be there. Alfred D. King, his brother who broke down during the service, was there. Lots of labor leaders were there. A bunch of clergy. Ralph Abernathy, another civil rights activist, was also there. Think about who showed up to this. There was a 3-mile mule-drawn procession through Atlanta. 100,000 people lined the streets in silence, occasionally singing the freedom songs, and Dr. Benjamin Mays gave the final eulogy. The people that showed up, all right, was pretty interesting to me. Ted Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Richard Nixon, George Romney, Eugene McCarthy, Celebrities Sidney Portier, Harry Belafonte, and then they even had representatives from Ghana, India, and other nations. Local officials were there as well. Atlanta Mayor Ivan Allen and Police Chief Herbert Jenkins. 120 million people watched this on TV. And of course, Vice President Hubert Humphrey was also there representing the executive branch as well. Kind of interesting, guys. You know, it's very very interesting that this happened, and everybody's okay with this. But I'm wondering how they're going to be when the funeral goes down for Charlie Kirk, and who shows up to that, and how many Democrats are going to sit there and make fun of it and trash it. And that's what I'm wondering about. You know, it's very interesting, and they're going to sit there and they're going to say that there's one video I watched where this guy was saying that Donald Trump is not going to attend the funeral because he doesn't give a fuck about unifying the country. It's like, okay, all right, I'll bite. Here's something else I want you guys to know about when it comes to that. George W. Bush did not even attend Coretta King's 2006 funeral. Martin Luther King's wife. He didn't even go. Barack Obama didn't even go to Nancy Reagan's funeral. Joe Biden didn't go to Shinzo Abe's funeral, the Japanese prime minister that was assassinated during his term as president. He didn't go to that. So there is precedent, if you will, to what the presidents do go to and don't go to. George Bush also didn't go to Thurgood Marshall's 1993. We're talking about George Bush Sr. He didn't go to this funeral at all. He was the first black Supreme Court justice, but he did not go. He sent Dan Quayle instead. Bill Clinton didn't go to Richard Nixon's funeral. Anthony Scalia did not get an attendance from Barack Obama in 2016. The long-serving conservative Supreme Court justice did not get a visit to that funeral from Barack Obama. So, and Lyndon Johnson obviously didn't go. He sent Humphrey. So there's precedent upon precedent upon precedent of people not going, of presidents not going to certain funerals. So again, it's both sides of the aisle that play these games, always looking for that political edge. And you know the crazier thing is I was watching another one of those political videos. I think it was on TikTok, and the lady's over there talking about the bullets and the engravings on those bullets from the shooter, Charlie Kirk's shooter, and she was sitting there saying that those markings weren't transgenderism at all. It was it was related to the manufacturer of the bullet. Of course, according to Snopes, and I know all the Democrats love to go to Snopes. They say that the markings found on the bullet casings during the shooting are not related to the manufacturer. Instead, they are inscriptions that have been found on the casings by the investigators. These inscriptions do not appear to be the manufacturer's, but rather related to messages that the shooter intended to convey. So the whole video, she's talking about the right getting all the information wrong, talking about how the right is fanning the flame and all this shit. But she doesn't even get that right. She doesn't get that right. And then there's another video of a guy cussing like it was nobody's business, where he's talking about how the right causes all the trouble. F you, you're a piece of nonsense, and but et cetera, et cetera. Just a whole profanity-laced kiss my ass and you meet me in the street and I'll kill you or something. And then he goes around and he says that the Republicans are, violent rhetoric, right? And it's like, okay. But then he says something that I was like, how do you know that? How the fuck do you know that? Or it's like, he was shot by one of you MAGA people. It's like, no. No, 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 no. Okay, he was raised by a conservative family that voted for Donald Trump. Yes. But he is his own person. He is a registered independent who has not voted in any election. We have no idea who he is. We literally do not know his political leanings. And he's now hiding behind his lawyer, so we may never know the actual motive. We don't know why he did it. He was upset at some of Charlie Kirk's views. He expressed that at some dinner tables with his family, but that might be the motive. I don't know. I don't want to hear him talk like that, so I'm going to kill him. That's possible. But to sit there and to say that he was killed by one of yours, that's not entirely true. We have no idea. And he will probably never tell us. And most of these shooters take their own lives. So a lot of the times, we'll never know whether they voted Republican or voted Democrat or had a certain right-leaning or extreme right or extreme left or left-leaning view. We will never know. And this is probably going to be the same thing. But what is insanely crazy to me is it's always the right. Don Lemon put out a video saying it's always the right. The pipe bomb thing, that was a right. Shapiro's the arson at his house, that was right leaning, et cetera, et cetera. And the left never does anything. And I gotta say, that's not true. That's not true. So let's do this deal. We're gonna go through both sides of the art of the deal here. Why not? Let's do this. And I'm only gonna do verified left wing violence and right wing violence. I'm not going to go through the stats of 10 times more likely to get shot or 5 times. That's all nonsense. Just looking at it side by side at what we're doing here. And we're going to go through a little history, a little back in time, maybe, right? We're going to figure it out. But in the 60s and the 70s, groups like the Weather Underground and the Black Liberation Army, they are left-wing groups that engage in bombings, armed robberies, targeted assassinations, and that was going on. That was not a right-wing thing. 1990s to 2000s, even though the left-wing violence declined a little bit, they still had isolated incidences. They were part of organized movements where somebody died in a riot or whatever. From 2010 to 2020, there were sporadic events from anti-fascist groups. BLM comes to mind as one of the more notable ones. But if you just go off of actual fatalities, from 2010 to 2025, there was roughly 30 left-wing fatalities, over 400 right-wing fatalities. So, yeah, from 2010 on, you're right. It has been escalating on the right side of the aisle. But to sit there and say that the left doesn't do anything, they're just angels trying to get, gun violence under control and right-wingers are always in the way, that's not true at all. Both sides of the aisle are firing guns. And the source for this is the ADL and the DHS. That's where I pulled these from. So it's not like you can't find it. And when you look at gun violence in general, the most notable one, obviously, is the congressional baseball shooting. James Hodgkinson, holy Christ. He was a left-wing nut. He believed Bernie Sanders on healthcare and economy, and he went and unloaded a gun on Republicans. Yeah. And the Charlie Kirk guy, we don't know, but the fact that he didn't agree with his right-wing views kind of tells you he's probably got a little left wing to him. That's just an assumption, not saying it's true, but it's possible. It really is. And the most recent stuff, I mean, everybody likes to bring up what happened to the Hortmans and the Hoffmans just recently out in Minnesota. But bringing that up and saying that we don't care or whatever, you don't know that. You have to understand that there are 340 million Americans, and on roughly 130 to 140 million of them have social media accounts on X or uh, TikTok or whatever, and they're all talking out of the side of their ass. And when you really look at how many podcasters, where most of this is coming from, like, Shapiro, Matt Walsh, etc., a lot of that is a very small number, and they have less than 5 to 10 million of the populations a year. It's not, and the point I'm making with that, guys, is it's not all conservatives. Not all of us are MAGA. Not all of us have these massive views of violence and war. Not all of us. Not all of us. And I know I've listened to some of these right wingers. And the reason this is really amplified is because they knew him personally. Anybody at the Daily Wire that is losing their marbles really should stop recording. They need to sit down and just take a breath and not say anything for a while, because they're going out there motivated and emotional, and they're saying a whole lot of shit that makes no damn sense and they have no evidence for. And they're getting beaten up by anybody on the left every time they open their mouth. They really should calm down and just grieve and grieve. I'm talking Shapiro, Walsh, Knowles, even Steven Crowder and his crew, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, all of you guys that knew Charlie personally or on some level really need to just grieve and not get on the microphone and say anything that's going to get you in trouble or get you put in a position where you can't come out of it in a good way. That is my overall message to these guys. They may never, they really won't do it because a lot of it is signed contracts and obligations that they have to just maintain being in the business that they're in. But if it was me and I had a personal connection to Charlie Kirk, I would take a breather. I would sit back. I would put out a thing and say, hey, you know what? I'll talk to you guys in a few weeks. This really personally hit me. And I would go to that funeral and I would support that family. But one thing I would not do is talk on the microphone. I just wouldn't do it. And I know that people would understand. People that, like people that have you as a guest spot or whatever, like they would have to understand. And if you have to pay a little bit to break the contract, break it. There's no reason to get out there and embarrass yourself and make it worse for the movement that you guys all tried to put together or want to continue. That's just kind of the way I look at this. But again, I don't think they will. The thing that is really the thing that really is getting to me, though, we can go, is like the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, for example, was widely debunked as a hoax, as somewhat of a hoax gone bad. And some people were convicted for the whole thing, but it never really was that's just my opinion, and I'll leave it there. But when you really look at some of this stuff, like I said, the Hodgkinson deal, he was a left-wing Bernie Sanders supporter. Luigi Mangione, he was motivated by his anger towards the healthcare industry, often associated himself with left-wing critics. Charlie Kirk's guy had some left-wing stuff, anti-conservative stuff that he was expressed and reportedly was online reading. This whole Gabrielle Gifford thing, they talk about her getting shot in the head. She was shot by Jared Loeffner, and we don't even know what his political views are, but they are constantly attributing that to the right. it was a right-leaning white man and whatever. It's like this dude was a nut. He was found mentally incompetent, but to even have a proper trial, he was out of it. It's like, come on, guys. And again, I'm not going to defend any of the right-leaning stuff at all. I'm really not, because making fun of things like the Pelosi deal or some of these mass shootings, where where we have found out that they were some conservative leanings on some of these guys, or some of these incidences rather. Um, it's it's not a good look. It's really not. Um, but again, I when you look at the right side of the aisle, you have January 6th. We can argue that all day, but I don't know. I don't know. The outcome of that, though, there was 5 officers that died after the incident. 140 officers were injured. They charged roughly 1,600, and then over 600 of that was law enforcement, assault, and such. Um, the pipe bomb thing I referenced was Caesar Soyak. He mailed pipe bombs to Obama, Biden, and Clinton. He was arrested and given 20 years. Paul Pelosi's guy. He was a far-right conspiracy theorist. The Anthony King murder. A Republican who thought his neighbor was a Democrat. Not entirely understanding that, but he shot him over political disagreements. Whatever, I guess. The Buffalo supermarket shooting was a white supremacist, which is really weird that group is always right conservative. I don't get that one, but okay. And of course the and of course there are multiple attempts on Donald Trump, and they say that was also conservative leaning. So once again, I am not going to defend that. Those are right-leaning incidences, but I've also given you some left-wing incidences. Obviously, my hot take out of that is the Republicans, in some odd way, know how to do this better than Democrats do. That's the only thing I can get out of that in terms of how high the death rates were and stuff. But overall, when you look at it side by side, both parties do this stuff all the time. And it's very disgusting that they blame each other so much. But as we go through it all, it does sadden. It is saddening. Saddens me. There we go. Saddens me. Yes. I agree. Right-wing violence is up since 2016. It has gone up. Left-wing violence during that time has been mainly focusing on property damage, corporate protesting through that. There are some lethal incidences there, but I mean, again, as I spread all this out, my biggest takeaway is both sides of the aisle do this. And they do this a lot. But again, I mean, a few of these guys have valid points, and I find it difficult to argue against some of them. However, we could discuss the ongoing debate between Republicans and Democrats for hours without reaching consensus. Yeah, I comprehend those feelings that are expressed by some who are advocating for war and on a rise in violence. After all, though, guys, these individuals had a personal relationship with Charlie Kirk, and they shared experiences with him. In contrast, many of us do not have these connections, which can lead to obvious differences in perspectives things of that nature. Um, of course, in a similar situation, when it comes to losing someone, why would I feel the need to care about or grieve for your loss? The truth is, I don't have an emotional investment in it because I feel absolutely no connection to the person that was lost. And that's a sentiment that I kept hearing. But shouldn't you have some kind of a connection to your fellow man in general, like human? I don't know. I mean, I don't know, guys. Like, I, I don't know what is your guys' feeling on this. I know I'm kind of all over the place. I know hopefully I've landed the plane on a few things. It's just I just been sitting on this, and it's just like, how do you talk about this without losing your mind? Both parties are very much attributing to the problem at various stages of it or various forms of it. And it boils down to I guess moral integrity, I guess. Or is that the right word? I don't know. I don't know. It's a mixed bag for me, guys. It's a mixed bag for me. It just is, and I just wish we would have some decency, some kindness to one another. You know, and one of the things I want to say before I bail out of here. Again, hopefully I've been able to get my point across that both sides do it at an alarming rate. And I know that the death tolls are different between the parties. But this is kind of where I'm at right now. It's like, where do we go from here? Do we come together or do we just split it up and say, Democrats, you get this half, Republicans, you get this half, you get your own presidents. Nobody gets to share in the cash. You get your cash, we get our cash, blah, 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 all done. Is that the way to do it? I don't know, guys. You tell me. You tell me. Let me know in the comments below. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.